Well, hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a great question, as I always do, and this one is so darn applicable. If you don't identify with this question, then you are not involved in any type of business. You're not involved in any type of sales. This is a great topic, a great question with a great guest. So I'm going to jump right in and ask this question. And it's really not a rhetorical one. I really want you to answer this because a lot of times we're too busy to even think about this question. And the question is are your margins eroding with discounts and concessions? And I'm like, man, if any time right now with the tariffs and any time with competition and all these things that are putting pressure on our precious margin, right now is a great time to have that conversation. So I found somebody that's really knowledgeable about this, and there's a ton of value going to be added today. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Tim Berry. How are you today, my friend?
Dave, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm a big fan.
Awesome. Well, thanks for jumping on. And you are the CEO at Sandler Training of Fort Worth. So you're from Texas. I guess the name gave it away, right?
Yes, sir. I spent most of my life in Chicago. I came down to Fort Worth, Texas, following a beautiful girl who I somehow convinced to marry me. And here I am. I'm in 99-degree heat for 3 months a year, which I just hate, but she's pretty cute and I love her to death. So,
Well, that's always how this goes, right? A girl leads us somewhere. Well, hey, I gotta say, being from Milwaukee, Chicago's not on our good list right now. Are you still a Cubs fan and a Bears fan, or did you kind of migrate to some Texas teams?
it's a great question. I am unbelievably a White Sox fan, which makes me the black sheep of the
Oh,
family and a glutton for punishment.
yeah,
And
no
also,
kidding.
I have a long standing love hate relationship with the Chicago Bears. I love to hate them, and they make me want to projectile vomit most of the time. But I can't let them go. It's like a bad habit.
Wow. Well, you just recently beat the Chiefs in preseason. Not that preseason means anything, but hopefully this will be a better year for you. So, you stole Craig Counsell, our Brewers pitch or our Brewers coach. So we're still not over that yet. So we still
Yeah,
kind
I
of fling
apologize
things.
about that.
That's all right. We fling things at people that are from Chicago, but it's all good. So thank you again for jumping on. And I really want to kind of just really hit the ground running here because I think this discussion about margin is just so important. So I kind of want to start there and then we'll backtrack. But what are you seeing on your world, Tim, from a margin erosion situation? I mean, is this prevalent now nationwide? Is this something that you see an end to? Kind of fill us in on what you're seeing on your end.
Yeah, David, it's a great way to start this excellent podcast. It is happening, and I do hear it all the time. Now I'm calling on, and I've got my pulse on the vein of many different businesses, and I do hear this. The margin squeeze is happening. You got tariffs that are impacting margins. You've got international and domestic competition. There's a little bit of a hesitancy in the marketplace, generally speaking, but that is definitely impacting margins. And so I've been helping my clients and teaching and preaching everywhere that we've got to do better in identifying and getting the prospect slash clients to really dig into what the compelling reason that their clients are going to buy from them. What's the pain, if you will? Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Love thinking about pain. Not necessarily outside of sales, but that's one of our big advantages is, typically people that don't have pain don't buy, right? So yeah, and so in that erosion discussion, I mean, are there some things that you've identified that you've been able to kind of help some clients with, at least maybe asking some questions, looking at their blind spots? I mean, if someone comes to you and says, Tim, I'm noticing margin erosion, whether it's for a quarter or 6 months, a year, whatever, for an extended period of time, I'm seeing this. What kind is your solution? What are some simple things that we might be able to do to combat that?
Sure. So what it really comes down to is a couple things. If you've got an existing client that's coming to you and sharing that they're getting their heads beat in over margins, I always start with don't necessarily retreat. You've got to go back and get the client to revisit the quantified pain. And the idea is this is that whatever reason, the reason that your clients buy from you is because you've been able to help them figure out a way that they're going to reduce the pain that they're having, and they're going to invest in that accordingly. So just to give you an example, one of my clients came to me and said, look, we've got this symptom happening, and margins are coming down. Okay, fair enough. So how are you engaging and re-engaging in your decision tree with the client in the first place? And so that the questions you want to find out are okay, what's actually happening? What have you tried to do to fix it? And the fix is not necessarily drop the margin, right?
Yeah.
You've got to get the client or the prospect to revisit the actual verifiable and quantifiable emotional pain in the first place. And so when we're able to do this, you've got to connect an emotion to whatever that number is. And then what I'm talking about is not just uh, the dollar amount, but I'm also talking about what is the resources, what are the resources that this is costing you? What's the mind share? What's the time commitment that this particular problem is costing you, and making sure that they're taking things in context, because competition is not new. The tariffs might be new. Most of them are temporary, but competition on margins is not a new thing. And so
Sure.
making sure that you stay plugged in, you've got a high level of trust built with your client, and then getting them to revisit why they're working with you even at a higher price is where I tend to start.
Wow, that's a great spot to start. And I don't want to slide past what you mentioned, because I think that a lot of us don't make a emotional connection enough with our clients. And I think that's where we miss this, because when you talk about pain, I always think about this. So if you're out in the backyard and you break your arm, you are going to go to the closest place to get that thing fixed, right? It's not like we're going to go drive around and get three bids and we're going to find out, this, that, or the other thing. We have an emotional connection with getting that pain eliminated. And I think that we as sales professionals, Tim, we miss that piece. We miss making that connection with that pain and then with that emotion. So are you noticing that too, that some of them, I'm going to call them amateurs, that the amateur salesperson is really kind of missing that spot where they're not making that emotional connection?
It's really the number one sin in sales is not getting the prospect to not helping the prospect discover that they have an emotional connection to it. Now, think about this: without the emotion in that pain, there's not really a compelling. There's a logical argument you can make, but so
Right.
is all of your competitors. So are everyone. Every salesperson is going to make a logical argument. The one that there's a rule in my world, and it's that we make decisions to purchase something intellectually, but we justify it emotionally. And
Yeah.
so if you leave out the emotion part, the next person that comes by and cuts your price for a nickel, they're going to go, oh, I'm going to go this way because I saved a nickel. But if you, the sales professional, can get an emotional connection to the pain of that you've separated yourself from your competitors in a very material way.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and again, go back to that piece. If somebody breaks their arm in your family, you're going to the closest place. You're not asking about insurance. You're not asking about, how long they've been in business. You're not asking them if they're friendly. All you really care about is relieving that pain. And I think that's where we miss, and that's what I love about David Sandler and the Sandler sales training world was he made that connection with people, and that's what caused him to be so successful was, I mean, I think of it like if there's no emotion, the likelihood of a sale is so little because, like you said, it's dollars and cents, it's logical. People buy emotionally, but they make their decisions intellectually, like you said, and I think I love when they said people love to buy, but they hate to be sold, right? People love to buy. So we have to kind of get in that mindset that the person we are selling something to, they really love that. And we're going to talk about ethical sales today because that's kind of a term that you coined and talked about a lot in your world. And so we want to make sure that we talk about that. But there are a lot of people listening right now, Tim, around the planet that really are excited to learn about your journey. We have a lot of people that want to start a business. They want to be in business for themselves, but they really, each week we try to give them a glimpse into the guest's journey. And we preface all the time by saying there's no right or wrong way to do this. The way that, Tim did it might be different than the way that you're going to do it. But kind of fill us in. Were you always an entrepreneur? Did you start in corporate America? Kind of walk us through, if you could, that journey and couple things that you learned along the way.
Yeah, happy to. Mine is an interesting story because the timeline is so long. So I started my first company when I was 14 years old, which
Okay.
is now 42 years ago. And I started it out of a little bit of greed and immaturity, but frankly, I just wanted money. I wanted to be able to buy some good clothes, and I wanted to buy the coolest Night Ranger cassette tapes and stuff. This is the mid '80s, and I was
At least
all
you
in.
didn't say 8 tracks. That was my era. So I'm glad you didn't say 8 tracks. So
Yeah, yeah. They still had 8 tracks in back when I first started buying them, but they had
yeah.
moved to cassette tapes, which is like a for all the young professionals on listening to this podcast. This is like listening to people talk about pterodactyls and dinosaurs,
Yeah.
but uh, but I wanted I felt compelled to earn money at a really young age, and my folks got divorced, and I wanted some economic freedom, and so the local grocery store wouldn't hire me because I was 14 years old, and so I
Yeah.
just started to I struck out on my own, cleaning people's houses in the rich part of town, and it worked. It worked. I ended up employing a ton of people and did really
Neat.
well with it. Ended up selling that company. And I never looked back because I think maybe God has a sense of humor, and I'm a colossal pain in the butt to work with. So uh, easier for me to start another company and do it. So I've done that 6 times in my career
Sure.
in founding new companies.
Wow. So have you ever worked for anyone other than yourself?
Yeah, and in short-term contract type gigs, I've done a bunch of like 2 year stints where I do
Okay.
turnarounds for companies that were struggling on the revenue side, and they'd bring me in, and
Sure.
for an equity piece, I would turn the company around and then get out after a 2 year run
Gotcha.
of helping them recover. So I have worked in that regards, but most importantly, even today, I work closely within the corporate cultures. I work mostly with small businesses under 10 million in revenue, but I've
Okay.
got a nice mix of the big, better, best, publicly traded, companies that are worth billions, and then hundreds of millions, and then but my sweet spot is really the small business owner.
Sure.
That's where my heart is.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Well, again, for the listener, there's no right or wrong to this. For him, Tim did this since he was 14 years old, and then, had some stints along the way. But again, I think the misnomer here, and I even said it, was working for yourself. And the reality is that I think that there's people think you can lay out on the beach, work a couple hours a day on your laptop, and then you're all set, right? And I realized, like, I've been in my own business since 91. So the vast majority of my career I've been working for myself. But the reality is I'm not working for myself. I'm working for my customer. And I think that that's what's interesting is if you do decide to take that jump and try to do something on your own for the listener, you're just switching, from working for the man to working for your customer. I mean, there's obviously huge benefits in both, so we're not here to say one's better or worse, but do your research, do your investigation. I mean, reach out to Tim after this is over and get an in-depth, because somebody that started a company at 14 that sold it, I mean, that's pretty darn cool. So he obviously knows what he's doing, and there's been six businesses over the last 35, 40 years for you, to really learn. How did you land on a sales training agency? I'm just curious how you ended up there.
One of my closest friends, somebody who I've known since I was 16 years old, bought a Sandler Training franchise probably 12 to 14 years ago. And he was excited about it. And he was like, Tim, you're a natural for something like this. And I was skeptical at first because I didn't understand the concepts. I had never heard of Sandler prior to that. But upon being immersed in it and looking at it and reading the books and participating in the training as a client, it made
Yeah.
a boatload of sense. I just fell in love with it, and that's how I ended up here. So it was one of those things. I was doing one at a time, scaling turnarounds, and it just made sense because here I could help a wider group of business owners in a more structured, meaningful manner. So Sandler was
Sure.
just perfect for me.
That's so cool. And I think it's interesting because I feel like there's probably a stigma to sales training. And, I've been involved in it for most of my career, and whether getting trained or doing the training. And I think it's interesting because if you look at any of the research, like Motorola was a great example where, they invested a bunch of money in their sales training, their team, because they knew there was such a high return on their investment. And I think it was 19 to 1, if I remember correctly. I think for every $19 or every dollar they spent on sales training, they got 19 back. So for any of the math people in the room, just imagine if we had that offer today. If Tim came on and said, "Hey, here's the deal. For every dollar you give me, I'm going to give you 19 back." We couldn't give Tim enough money to make, we'd be like $100,000. Is that enough? A million? I mean, what's the limit on that? And yet there's so many people that think that sales training is negative. So when you have that kind of thrown back in your face, what are some things that you kind of talk to those prospects about, Tim, to try to help them better understand the real importance of sales training?
Well, I have a lot of empathy for people who have been burned in the past. And this goes back actually to just sales, right? In sales, I know for sure you have been burned by an unscrupulous, manipulative salesperson in your past. I know
Yep,
I have for sure
yep,
many, several
absolutely.
times.
Yep,
And sales training can be that same way. The problem I think with most sales training or a lot of sales training is that the foundation is that you tell your customer or manipulate your customer into uh, receiving a presentation so the salesperson can talk about their wares, and there's a psychological manipulation that is involved there, and it is unscrupulous. It what gives us that ick factor when we think of walking into a furniture store or walking onto a car lot where you've got
yep,
the cheesy used car salesperson that
yep.
comes up to you and pretends they're interested. And so I think the foundation upon which I run my sales training company is this: is that sales is every bit as noble a profession as being an engineer or a professor or a librarian or a doctor or a good attorney. There's a nobility in the profession if you treat it like a profession. And so
Right.
I teach this concept that I call ethical sales. And if you would allow me to define it, it's pretty simple. It's ethical sales is selling something to someone that they both want and need. And the other piece of this, there's a second piece. It's not selling something to someone that they don't want or need.
Yeah.
And when you've got a foundation, a core that is rooted in ethical sales, you've got a fiduciary duty to do no harm and to do right by your prospect, even if it means that you have to determine together that there's not a fit. And so the
Yeah.
only way you can really do that is by building trust, gaining equal business stature, but then most importantly, being frank and honest and an open book. And I
Yeah.
think that's what separates. That's why I like the Sandler methodology. It's a Socratic methodology, in that your entire sales call is about asking questions, not about talking about how cool or great you or your company or your product or service are.
Yeah. Well, it's a truly win-win situation that, I mean, again, in negotiations, we do a ton of, keynotes around the country, and we just did one on win-win and conflict. And it's crazy when you ask somebody, like, what are some words that pop into your mind when you think about conflict? They're all negative words. War, stress, pressure, pain. There are all these negative words where in conflict isn't a positive or a negative. It's just two people with a difference of opinion. We have created that negative connotation. And I feel like we've created that in sales as well. Who on this call likes to go to spend the day over at the car dealership, it's just like, man, people get nervous about it. They delay it. Because they're so afraid that they're going to buy something that they didn't want to buy, and they're going to get sold something that they didn't, really want to purchase. And so that's what I think is awesome about the ethical sales piece. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to unpack that with you, Tim, because this is really something I think that's going to revolutionize someone listening right now, because again, we're not looking at this sales process correctly. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I am honored to be hanging out with Tim Berry, the CEO at Sandler Training of Fort Worth. And we are knee deep into talking about sales. And I don't know why, but this just sometimes is like naughty words not to talk about. When I was raised, I was don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, and don't talk about finances. It's like, I don't know where that whole thing came from, right? But yet now sales seems to be kind of like added to that list. And it's just like, wow, wait a minute here. This is a really, like you said, a credible place to be. It's a great profession to be in. I think the research that I did that I found was like 2 out of 3 people in the US workforce are in some kind of sales, whether it's inside sales, outside sales, customer service, all these pieces that are there. And I don't know about you, but before I was exposed to Sandler, there was always like, there was a prospect system, and then there was some kind of system that I tried to have, but really wasn't successful at it, you know. And when the prospect comes in, I mean, it's crazy. It's okay. Why is it okay for us as a consumer? It's okay to lie to salespeople, right? Somebody walks up to you at that furniture store you were talking about. It's 80 degrees out. It's absolutely gorgeous out. I'm there with my wife. The last place I want to be. I want to be on my motorcycle I want to be on my Jeep with my top down. I want somewhere other than standing in this, furniture store. And here comes a guy, pops up from behind the couch and says, "Hi, can I help you?" And then I lie to the guy. Right. And I say, oh, no, I'm just looking. It's like, dude, you are so not just looking. Why do you do that? It's like we're just prone to do that. We're so protective of everything. And I'm just curious, are you seeing that in your world that that seems to be okay to kind of fib and tell one to the average salesperson? Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, well, I have a name for it. I call it it's called salesperson and salesperson hate. And because we're constantly lying to salespeople, even we as salespeople and lifelong business owners, we're like, nah, I'm just looking. And we know darn well you aren't in that furniture store for nothing. You're there to buy the couch
Yep,
or the end table or the
exactly.
bedroom set or whatever. You know darn well exactly what you're looking for. You just don't want to be harassed by a
Right.
salesperson following you
Yep.
around. And so, yeah, it's we call it salesperson and salesperson hate. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it is. And it's like again, I didn't just buy a couch, so no, I'm just kind of really looking around for the day. I'm going to spend the afternoon sitting on every couch that you have. I just bought one, so I don't need one. I mean, it's like nothing could be further from the truth. But like you said, the last thing we want to do is have somebody like looking over our shoulder, watching over us, so we kind of give them the I'm just looking, and then they say, hey, if you got any questions, I'll be around. And I say, okay. And that's like the first little dance that happens. And I feel like I won because, hey, I told him or her that I'm just looking. They know as well as I do, I'm not just looking, so it's like, I wish someone would just call me out on it and say, okay, seriously, Dave, it's 80 degrees out. It's a Saturday. There's not a cloud in the sky. I see your Jeep in the parking lot. You'd much rather sit in here than be out there. I mean, I wish someone would just call me out on it.
Well, you know,
Um,
Dave, it's just something to think about, and I know you know this, but this is for your audience's benefit.
yeah.
Uh, with the invention of the internet, 80% of the buying decision is already made by your prospect before they ever engage with a
Wow.
salesperson in the first place. Now, think
Yeah.
of what happens as AI takes over
Yeah.
even more. And that's going to be bigger than the internet when it really comes down to it. And
Yeah.
so the elixir, the salve for a salesperson to not get lied to is to one, build trust, and then two, gain equal business stature. Right? The
Yep.
the salesperson should not be talking more than 30% of the time, which means that they should be listening to the prospect speak 70% of the time.
Yep.
That's a lot. And
Yep.
that's difficult to do, especially depending on your temperament. Now, if you're a unbelievably direct communicator and your brain operates as a series of to-do lists, it might be super easy. But if you are a salesperson that has a temperament where you're a social butterfly and you can talk about the weather or the Chicago Cubs or what's on the cooking channel for 45 minutes, you might have a much bigger challenge tethering your tongue to only
Yep.
30% of the time. But
Sure.
the sale cannot be about the salesperson ever. It has to be
Right.
about the prospect and what they want. And so
Yep.
gaining the mutual business stature, building a mutually agreed upon agenda for what that prospect wants to talk, and then identifying your own role as the sales professional in there. You should be just facilitating conversation by asking questions. And this is how that bad name of the sales training, is extinguished. Is you realize that trust is the number one thing because nobody ever buys anything from someone that they do not trust. But then when the prospect gets to have real input on what the rules of the game are moving forward, that
Yeah.
makes all the difference in the world. It's like going to the dentist.
Right.
You're sitting in that chair with the blinding lights on top of you, and there's $150,000 of stainless steel tools next to your head. You definitely have angst. But when the dentist comes in, he or she will say, here's what's going to happen next. And what happens is physiologically, you as the patient in the chair, your blood pressure is reduced, your heart
Yeah.
rate slows down, your anxiety level comes down. We need to do that same thing with our prospects. As the sales pro, we have to be able to de-escalate and make them comfortable and feel safe.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I remember when I was a kid, Tim, man, I went to my parents' dentist, and I tell you what, it was 100 years ago before they even understood empathy. And the guy said, "Open your mouth," and I swear, man, that needle was like 2 feet long, and I feel like he was running at me full speed, scared me to death, and scared the crap out of me to the point where I hate going to the dentist to this day. And I told the dentist, so he was like you just said, "Hey, this is what you're going to taste. This is what's about to happen. This is what you're going to hear." All these things. It did totally change. I think Sandler calls it an upfront contract. So, that's where I think it's really helpful for us, to be able as sales professionals to realize that we're on equal playing ground here. Like you said, we're not subservient to the prospect. They're sure not subservient to us. This is an adult to adult conversation, and it's either going to work or it's not. I mean, if they don't have a red couch, I'm probably not going to buy a green couch, even though I had my heart set on red, right? So it's okay to say no. And this is where I think we lose a lot of sales professionals because they want to try to fit that round peg in a square hole. Well, hey, close one eye, it might look a little more like red. Or, you know what, how about it? We'll get a red light and we'll make it look red. I mean, all these things and I think that's the stuff that people get really nervous about is, hey, if you don't have what I want, I'm just afraid that you're going to try to sell me something that you have, even though I don't want it. And I think it says a lot about a prospect because it's like, man, they really can't say no. I mean, it's hard for people to say no, right? Like, hey, can I help you? No. Why don't you just say no rather than I'm just looking? Why not just, be open and upfront with it, right at the beginning? So, the other thing which is interesting you brought up, and I want to get your feedback on, was listening skills and questioning techniques are really something that I'm not seeing a lot of salespeople getting trained on. We train on listening skills, we train on questioning techniques, we speak on it all over the country. But it's interesting because I'm not seeing that a lot, and I'm just curious, when a non-trained salesperson comes to you for training, are you seeing listening skills and questioning techniques as kind of a wanting area that they're struggling with?
Yeah, I think again, because most people are uncomfortable talking to strangers, I find it to be utter irony that we grew up in a world where it was rude to talk about money and it was dangerous to talk to strangers. That was the mantra that our parents beat into our
Yep.
skull. And yet, as salespeople, you're supposed to talk to strangers about their money. And I
Yep.
always think that that was just a wonderful irony. But
Yep.
in the end, what it really comes down to is having genuine curiosity is important. And when it's not about you, when the sale is not about you, it's about
Yep.
having good adult meaningful conversation to help discover if there's a fit or not. And not is to your point, and I think let's not lose that fact just for a second. A no is a perfectly acceptable outcome to a conversation about a sales conversation
Right.
because then you can just move on, right? If someone
Yep.
tells you no, that's great. Every salesperson wants to hear the word yes. That's the happiest word that a salesperson could hear because it means a payday, of course. But
Right.
no is one that untrained salespeople will often they'll wince at. And for me, I just get to move on. I don't, someone can tell me no, it doesn't hurt my feelings, and then we can part as friends, and I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about chasing you or following up
Right.
eternally
Yep.
and whatever. And so, again, I think the idea is that when you have equal business stature with your prospect and you've built a mutually agreed upon agenda, you got to close it up with, okay, talk about what are the outcomes? No, yes, or maybe you do need some more information. And then you have to get crystal clear on what information, who else needs to be involved, and when are we doing this again, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those types of things establish you as apart from your typical salesperson who is honestly trying to wheel and deal and convince you that
Yeah.
you want what they have.
Yeah.
In my world, I teach salespeople, look, have an honest adult conversation, no pressure, and help them discover that maybe they do you need you, but maybe they don't.
Right. No, absolutely.
Well,
And I think that,
that
oh,
might
go
sound
ahead.
contrarian, but it's an artful way. There's an idea of having forced conversations, but then there's the artful
Right.
application of the sales process that helps build trust. So
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why people struggle saying no, because if I say no to a salesperson, generally the untrained sales professional is not going to say, okay, great, thanks for coming. If it changes, let me know. They're going to try to, well, why? They're going to try to manipulate. So that's why it's way safer to say, hey, I'm going to think it over. They can't do anything to think it overs, right? And those are yet, like you said, those clog up all our pipelines that keep so many false expectations out there. And I think as we talk about that ethical sales process, to be able to say, I don't know if I can help you is like I mean, that's like refreshing when there are few times as a prospect, as a consumer, when somebody's like, saying that to me, let's talk about this and we'll see if I can help. I'm not sure. I lean into that way more than anything else because I think all the pressure's gone because they just said, I don't know if I can help you because, and all of a sudden, if they can't help, I love not having pressure because I think the more pressure is put on us, the less we buy. And so I'm just curious when you think about the ethical sales journey that you put your clients on, do they resist it at first? Is it hard for them to unlearn that sales training that they had where, press hard, the third copy's yours. If I could show you a way, would you buy today? Whatever your famous close is. I'm just curious, do people struggle with the ethical sales thought at first?
the concept of ethical sales is pretty easy to accept. It actually takes pressure off of the salesperson to do some fancy dance, right? Most
Yep.
people get into sales and they're like, oh, I'm a people person. And then they start doing the proverbial spinning plates, right? They got, oh, now I can spin 8 plates and none
Yep.
of them fall to the ground. And there's a phoniness, there's a untrustworthiness that emits out of those types of people. So when they hear in week one of my sales training, I talk about the concept of ethical sales, and you can almost feel that it takes the pressure off of all of the students being trained. And
Yep.
now, is it hard to apply? Sometimes, if you've got 35 years of experience selling the old school Tin Man way, it
Yeah.
may be tough because you're going to have to break an old habit. But
Right.
the idea of sales training is that I bring to the table is this: sales training is a process, not an event. Like I'm not going to do a 2 day boot camp, throw people in there and go, now you know how to sell.
Yeah.
Sales training is the adult learning model requires that you do little bits at a time, and it's behavior modification. And
Right.
so you're not, starting as a 25-year salesperson, just killing it coming into my sales training, and then it's like, stop doing everything you've already, made you successful to this date. It's not it
Yeah.
at all. It's like here's some pieces that you might want to start shifting on, and it happens over time.
Yeah.
But that is the model. It's an immersion model, and it happens over time.
And couple questions as we start to land the plane today. Um, I can't believe how fast this went because, like, I feel like we just getting started, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, we're almost done here. I love talking about this, but I'm curious, like for you being in Fort Worth, if somebody's listening from wherever outside of Fort Worth, are you doing virtual things? Does it have to be in person? Kind of how does that, what's the logistical path for that?
Sure. It depends on the clients. I've got private clients that have, a dozen or more uh, salespeople that need to be trained, and they do have them all in one location. So I can go to
Okay.
them, but this is 2025. Almost
Yeah,
everything is digital. I run my classes all on Zoom, and everybody piles into the Zoom room. It's very interactive. So we do it. It can be done face to face, but I've got clients in 17 different states, and they're all coming in and piling in Zoom rooms, so
yeah,
we can communicate virtually and avoid the expense and hassle of
sure.
travel.
Too much traveling is not good, and especially in this where we're able to be so effective on Zoom. That's awesome. You have a opportunity, an online sales training session called Sales Lab Live. So kind of fill us in on what that is.
Sales Lab Live is birthed out of a mentoring concept that I had for young brand new entrepreneurs. And as it's turned out, I'm running this Thursday, I'm running my 20th episode of it. Now, Sales Lab Live is a free 30-minute sales training
Okay.
session. I do it on Zoom at every Thursday at 11 a.m. Central. And we
Okay.
cover all kinds of different sales related strategies, best practices, and techniques, things that you can actually use right out of the box. As soon as the training is done, you can literally pick up the phone and start prospecting and use this stuff. I do it every week, and it's like I said, it's interactive. I think I'm regularly getting people to participate in the Zoom, but I also do it on Instagram Live, and I think I ended up with 40 people last week on the Instagram Live. So we are picking up some steam on that side,
Awesome.
and it's always a different topic every week.
Sure.
And it's like I said, it's always relevant to and stuff that you can use immediately.
Sure. And if somebody listening, Tim, would want to get on that call, how would they do that?
Just email me. My email is tim.barry, Barry, at Sandler, Sandler.com. Tim Barry at Sandler, tim.barry at Sandler.com. I'll send you the Zoom link with the calendar invite. You can come and go as you please. You can show up for 3 weeks, and you can be busy and tied up with other prospecting activities or closing business for 8 more weeks. It doesn't matter, because
Sure.
we're going to
Okay.
continue to do it, and I'm going to keep adding value no matter what. So
Awesome. That's so cool. So, hey, two last questions before I let you go, Tim. What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered you want to reiterate, or maybe it's just something we haven't had a chance to chat about. But what would your tip of the day be today?
I think the tip of the day would be you don't have to like prospecting, you just have to do it. There is no getting away from the fact that you can spend all of your time learning. You can spend reading, you can do research on your target, you could build lists, you can do all kinds of things. But you've got to pick up the phone. You have to get in front of your end user, your buyer, and you have to do it 6 to 8 times per week. Again, depending on your sale,
Sure.
you got to get on there a whole bunch. And you don't have to love prospecting, but you just have to do it. And the reason I say that as the tip of the day is uh, only about 20% of salespeople are actual sales hunter, like natural born hunters. Most of the rest are some form of farmer or hunt gatherer, and so the prospecting piece is the part that gets neglected the most. And what I've learned is that the way that you will end up with variable results in your sales business is to neglect your prospecting by allowing everyone else's problem become your number one priority. And
Yeah.
so That would be my sales tip of the day.
I love that. And I think that I'm like, okay, I lied to you. Now I got another question. So, because I think about this and like I get this all the time about these, people spending time on LinkedIn or Facebook. I mean, research, investigation, I'm not sure that that's really prospecting. How do you define prospecting? Because I see a lot of people spend 6 hours a day on LinkedIn and get down 100 rabbit holes and think they had a great productive day. But the reality is they never really picked up the phone and talked to one individual. And so I'm just curious, how do you define prospecting for somebody that's just listening to what you just said?
Yeah, the I think this might be the most important piece of all. So you've got to, if you're going to scale your business, if you're going to start to really achieve, you've got to spend 60% of your day hunting for new business,
Yeah,
which means that's a lot of time. That's, if you're looking at the white space on your Outlook calendar, you've got to spend 3 of the 5 days hunting. Now, I'm not saying that do Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and goof off on Thursday and Friday. What I'm saying
yeah,
is that block out 90-minute blocks 3 times a day, 5 days a week. And
yeah,
then you've got to mix it up, because if you pretend that you're going to spend 4.5 hours a day cold calling, you're going to burn out so bad. You're going to
yeah.
flame out in 2 days. It's going to be over. So time block your calendar and then figure out cold calling, networking events, do public speaking, be on LinkedIn, posting content on LinkedIn, Instagram, even TikTok. Give and get referrals. Build your referral network. Find your best referral partners, and then get to know them and become advocates of their businesses. And so I've put together a what I call a behavior a prospecting cookbook. And if you want, this is up to you. I'll email it to you. You can give it away for
Sure.
free. I do
Yeah.
not care. So it's just a free Excel spreadsheet, and I just list out here's the prospecting behaviors, and in that 4.5 hours per day, that almost 5 hours per day that you're supposed to be prospecting, you you parcel out 30-minute blocks or 60-minute blocks based on that,
Sure.
and that's
Yeah.
that's how I would do that. So
Wow, that's awesome. Well, yeah. So for anyone listening, if they want a copy of that, just email Tim at tim.berry@sandler.com and he will gladly send that. Send it to me as well in case somebody comes through us on that end, Tim. But this is where, as we land today, this is why it's so powerful because if you don't have a sales system, you are following the prospect system. And the prospects have been perfecting this system forever on how to suck you dry for information, give you nothing, take a ton. And so that's why we are out here. And that's why Tim's out here because, hey, you know what? Why let them have all the fun? Let's have some fun on our end. Let's, create an ethical sales path for you, an ethical sales process so that you're able to, you know, um, then this way you won't have to worry about your margins eroding as much. If you create your own system, you will have a much higher likelihood of success. And again, back to what we talked about with Motorola, if you want to see dollars come back, you have to invest. I don't know why salespeople think that they were just naturally born salespeople and they have a couple closing statements or a couple of things that, tools that they use or gymnastics moves that they have, and they think that that's going to work for being a professional, in sales, and it just doesn't work. And we just scratched the surface today. So if somebody's listening right now, Tim, and they want to connect with you, is that email address the best place for them to go?
yeah, you can email me at tim.berry@sandler.com, or check out my YouTube channel. If you go and do at Sandler Training of Fort Worth, you can see all of the previous. I've got 19 episodes of Sales Lab Live on there, and you can
Cool.
message me through that as well.
Awesome. Perfect. Sales Lab Live. 30 minutes of free training each week. If you can't invest 30 minutes of your week, then either sales isn't important to you, you've arrived and you're independently wealthy and you don't need the money, or you're just not even paying attention here, which is fine. Again, we just give you the resources each week to be able to, improve your world. And this is a great way to do that. And especially, I think it's cool when you have multiple people on a call. I know when I participate in these types of calls, generally I learn as much, if not more, from the people in the audience. No offense, Tim. I'm the same way. I do these different types of things, and people are like, oh, it was so awesome. I learned so much from so and so and so and so. And, I'm just like, this is awesome. So again, Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central, and email Tim and he'll be happy to get you connected and hooked up there. So thanks again for hanging out. Wow, this was so cool. It's great to understand more and do a deeper dive into thinking about, margin erosion and how we can work through that. And again, it comes back to what you started with. It's the pain, it's the emotional connection, and it's the trust. And if you have those three going, you are going to make more, you're going to do better. And at the end of the day, I think the client is going to be way happier when they can say no or they can say yes, because none of us like getting forced into having to say yes just to secretly close it down and say no 3 days later and send an email and say, I'm sorry, I got to cancel that order because I didn't really want it in the first place. So, um, but that's again, we're going to get you back on, Tim, to go to part two and part three of this because there's so much here. It's hard to learn the Sandler system in an hour. So thank you so much for jumping on and for wetting our whistle. And can't wait to see where this takes you. I'm excited to watch.
Dave, thank you so much. It was great. And anytime, you just say the word.